Hello, welcome. Hi, Renee.
Hey Tamra, happy Monday afternoon.
Happy Monday afternoon. I'm glad to be back on HR Huddle and had a great vacation in the Tetons. I know lots of people are vacationing this year, so which is great. We've been talking about that in these HR Huddles, so glad to be back. And I heard you and Jen had a good conversation about salaries last time and compensation and what we should be paying attention to given the market that we're in. So I think it was an idea or two to wrap up on that conversation. And then we're going to jump in and talk about on-campus recruiting since that season is coming up for HR professionals. So maybe you want to add what we wanted to include about salaries from our last conversation or your last conversation with Jen.
Yeah, thanks, Tamra. So the thing that we did not have time for was paying remote employees or remote team members and how to approach that strategically. And firms are trying to figure out, Tamra, if I'm in the Midwest and I'm hiring people on the coast, or vice versa, if I'm on the coast and I'm hiring in other parts of the country, maybe that have a lower cost of living than mine or a higher cost of living than mine, how do I handle that? And then we have people sometimes who are in a high price market and they move to a lower price market. And so just trying to figure out what is the strategy for that? What's fair from a firm perspective and what's fair from the team member's perspective.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think we're seeing that a lot, that firms are trying to figure out the answer. And I'm sure you and Jen talked about last time that it's an employee market. And so in today's market, we have to be super sensitive to make sure we're paying at market or above. And that might mean paying their market rates, especially, if they were hiring in those markets. But also, if they move out of a higher pay market, we don't want to, at this point, be reducing compensation. I think you and I were talking about the example of moving from Seattle to Iowa. And what that might look like. And we need to evaluate that. But I think in today's market, be cautious about reducing that compensation.
Yeah, and I guess the guiding principle, Tamara, is that people have choices. So if they are moving from Seattle to Iowa and we say we're going to have to reduce your comp by 20%, and they can find another firm that's willing to pay them what they were making in Seattle, we're likely to lose them. And so that's really the risk. And maybe we can look at some sort of long-term strategy of over the next 5 years, we don't accelerate their compensation as fast, so we can pull them back to being more in line with their peers. But ultimately, you're exactly right. It's a seller's market for talent. Right. And so we just have to be so careful that we're keeping people happy, or at least our high performers who really would lay our head down on the desk and cry if they left us. We want to have them feel like they're being compensated according to market and according to what's fair.
Well, and also billing rates is a way that we calculate compensation sometimes. Some firms are still using that method of figuring out billing rates and compensation and that multiple. And so if we are still billing at Seattle rates, continuing with our example here, then we should probably, be paying close to or similar to that as well. So that's another way to kind of look at, you can kind of move around and look at this compensation discussion from a few different views.
Right. And we just need also, I think the other thing to remember is that we just need a strategy and an approach. As we're going to be doing more remote hiring, let's agree as a team so that every single time we make a hire, we're not having to sit down and talk about it. It feels like a new decision every time, but we have some sort of strategic approach for it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's good. I think that's good to acknowledge because we know a lot of firm leaders are discussing it, and it's something that, HR, professionals should be informed about and help guide that strategy, like you said. And it could be, here's our strategy for 2021, and let's reevaluate it in 2022, to your point. And let's just continue to evaluate what the market is doing, where we are with employees, where we are with capacity. The other thing I just want to say to kind of wrap this discussion up is we're hiring specialized skills. And sometimes we have to pay for those specialized skills. And I think that's important too.
Yes, like if we're hiring someone who's going to be a rainmaker or who brings salt expertise to our tax practice or high-level client accounting services manager that's going to bring an outsourced CFO practice, yes, we might have to pay more for that. It may not be just exactly what it costs to find an accountant at that level in our marketplace. Right. Very smart, Tamara. Yeah. And in the same way, the firms, if they came in and they purchased your organization, they would be looking at, if you have those kinds of specialized skills, your organization would be worth more.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
So, on-campus recruiting.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk about this because I feel like it's on the horizon. It's July 26th. And so you might say, well, it's a little early, but we're gearing up, we're getting ready. That's going to be happening here in the fall. And so I'm so excited that we're talking about it now, Tamara. We can back up and think maybe big picture with our folks that are here on the line with us about what kind of things they should be thinking about this year, things they could do differently to have a better result. What do you think about that? Are you still there, Tamara? Maybe you're frozen. I can't hear you speaking. So I'm just going to keep going. So yeah, no, that's fine. So, first of all, what I would want to do is look sort of across the board globally at what are the campuses that we've been recruiting at for the last few years, and think about, do we want to add to that list, or do we want to remove any of those from the list that haven't really been that successful for us? We have to continually examine that, I think, year over year, and just look at the ROI if we're going to go sink a bunch of effort into these schools. So make sure that they are paying dividends. And then we might want to think, big picture about if we're trying to accomplish some new things, like you were talking about specialized skills. Maybe we're going to go to some different campuses that have those kinds of specialized programs. Or if we're looking to have a more diverse pipeline of talent, perhaps we want to add some schools where we're going to find that diversity from, different perspectives, perhaps racial diversity. We might want to go and identify some different schools that we're going to recruit at this time around. So I would want to, first of all, look like big picture at what are the schools I'm going to recruit at this year.
Well, and where have we been having success? I think that's one of the things that you're pointing to, like do some analysis.
Yes.
And I know this past year is an anomaly, but prior to that, where are we having success? And then where do we want to, focus our efforts, and what maybe new places we should try, or new types of degrees even. I mean, there's a lot of combination of degrees, with business analytics and, combined with accounting or finance, and, what other kind of degrees should we be, looking for? So I think that's.
Yes, technology, like some technology expertise, bringing in some folks. Yes. Yep. Okay. So then the next thing I would want to think about is, for the schools where we are going to go and recruit, what else could we do there? How could we go deeper this time around so that we could be improving our relationship with campus personnel, or improving our branding out there on campus? And that might be a little bit more of a long range thing than just your fall recruiting, but really like stepping back and taking a big picture look at what do we want to do differently this time around to get a better result from the campuses that we choose. And, one thing I think is a mistake is that people are trying to do that all by themselves. Let's say you have a small core team of people, or even just HR, and they bring a few interviewers with them, but they're doing all the thinking and planning and relationship building themselves. And I would want to do that in a team approach. So I would want to have a team for each campus, ideally people who are plugged into that campus if we can. If we have alumni from those, let's get them involved and see if they can go back and leverage some of those relationships from when they were there, or just bring kind of that know-how about that particular school to help us figure out how can we go deeper.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about roles grids before when we've talked about the HR function, and we have roles grids. Anybody that knows us, you might have been exposed to our roles grids when we talk about ownership. If you would like a copy for the HR function, message us in social media or email us. But one of the things that we do that Renee's talking about is we have an owner for each campus, and then each of the relationships underneath it in the functions. And that way somebody's doing the thinking and the planning and the owning for it.
Yes, I think that's really smart, Tamara. And that can be, down to the granular level of who owns the relationships with the accounting professors, who owns the relationship in the career center, Who's going to manage, like, if we are going to bring some sort of giveaways to campus, or we want to be sure that we go and get involved with the accounting club, who owns that relationship and is reaching out and saying, what else could we do? How else could we get involved with your students? Really sort of mining that relationship to see where else we could go with it.
Well, and we've heard that firms that go deep versus broad, and maybe even second tier, I don't know that I like that phrase, but second tier, universities or colleges really get a name for themselves, though. They have more success in the campus recruiting and the interviews and the recommendations that they're getting from professors and the career centers and those kinds of things. So it's really important to build those relationships.
And you'll also learn when you do that what your competitors are doing on campus, because some of the trends we've been seeing the last few years are people are making offers earlier. People are not necessarily doing leveraging the career fair, but looking at other opportunities to get up and get close and personal to accounting students. And so they'll sort of guide you towards that or give you ideas about what's going to work on their particular campus if you have those relationships. And it is a little bit of a quid pro quo, I think, Tamara, that if you'll come on campus and do resume review, or if you'll agree to do like Zoom practice interviews with the students, then the campus people are much more likely to say, hey, here are some tips and tricks, or try this, or, be willing to help you too. So you really do have to make an investment of time. And that's why if we're recruiting at 20 campuses, which is a little bit outrageous to even say it, but we have to just probably think about narrowing that and going deep. You're exactly right, Tamara, to have the kind of impact we want to.
And what about this remote blended environment that we're in? Maybe we should talk about that for a minute.
Well, some firms are doing remote internships. They're doing remote hires, just right, first year hires. And some, definitely, is that going to continue? I don't know. I mean, some organizations have somewhat gone back to the office, or they've gone back to this blended environment. And so I do think you have to have a strategy for that. I think you're going to have students asking about it. I can't imagine they wouldn't be, Tamara. And I know we're seeing it as we're recruiting out there for clients that, it's one of the things, like right on the tip of the tongue of the candidates is, what's the expectation for being in the office versus having the opportunity to work from other places? So I can't imagine that the students wouldn't have questions about that too. And they're hearing their peers and that are going to work at maybe other firms, they're having the ability to do that. Yeah. So I do think we're going to have some sort of discussion. I would have discussion ahead of time about what are we going to say to candidates. It's really interesting, Tamara. I was on the line with some HR folks today because they're doing some experience hire recruiting and trying to develop new strategies. And, one of the things they said is it's very challenging to talk about perks because they don't have their perks solidified. They're more like on a one-off basis. Oh, sure, Tamara, if you want to, you can work from home. But how do you really market around that or really sell around that? If you think about it, it needs to be, this is our approach as a firm. And so that might be something you can't get figured out before you go do campus hiring, but I think it's probably going to be an issue that firms are facing as they show up for that they're going to get a lot of questions from students about it. And they shouldn't get upset or like, oh, those stroppy students, those, asking all these questions. They should be glad to have a job because, as you and I know, it's a very competitive market right now. For students too, it's tough to get them to sign up, and then it's also tough to have them show up. I think that's been another trend, is that students sign up and then at the last minute they say, I'm going to do something else. And so we want to stay in touch with those students when we do get them locked in, stay in touch with them, interact with them. If you're making offers to sophomores or juniors, be sure somebody owns that relationships and is really staying in touch with those young people until we actually have them walk in the door. Because I don't think it's not like it used to be where we could lock them in and they would definitely show up. We've been seeing some different things with retention.
Well, and I think that's part of this blended strategy is that, I think we need to demonstrate that we can recruit remotely and that we can work remotely, and that we want to, have an opportunity to be in person. And some young people want to be in person to get the lay of the land. And I think it's just like, you've probably been experiencing, if you've done any surveys of your people about the blended environment, what people prefer, it's like the bell curve. And you probably have that, maybe a little bit higher in person, but I don't know that that's true, with the young people, but you probably have a bell curve. People just have different preferences, and we have to figure out how to create that stickiness that you're talking about and the culture, and have it be in mixed mediums, and have it be, one size fits one. And, that we're proven in that way, that we can make that work. And this is how we are working together. This is how we work as a team. This is how we serve our clients. This is how we do onboarding and training, that we're still meeting people. We have opportunities to meet people, whether I'm in person or not. So just all of that needs to be thought about and, looked at for that kind of environment.
Yeah, for sure, Tamara. And you're making me think of something very interesting. I think in our senior program, I've been noticing, so we're doing this program right now. We have, between 60 and 65 seniors with us at one time on a roundtable, and they're of varying ages. So some of those seniors are 5-7 years in, and some of them, I think either they have been a senior longer, or it took them longer to get there, or they got recruited later because people are going back and getting accounting degrees later in life. And so we might also want to talk about, from a strategic standpoint, what is our ideal target candidate, and perhaps open that up a little bit. So are we open to people where it's second career? Do we want to go to these, what you called second tier schools, or maybe community colleges, places where we would attract really hardworking students that have returned to accounting from after doing something else, working for 10 years for a retail store, then they go back and get a degree. I mean, that's a person who puts themselves through school while they're also working full time. Wow. Or pursued some other sort of sports career before they came to accounting. So just thinking about, are there other ways to identify that really great candidate other than they finished their degree in 5 years and they've already taken the CPA exam? Because there aren't a lot of folks like that. That's a small pool of people that we're all sort of scrambling for here in the accounting profession. So opening that up and looking more creatively at what we might want to hire.
Well, you're making me, so my latest Hulu binge is The Rookie. And the whole premise of the movie, it's a 45-year-old, guy that went back to school to become a cop, later in life. And so he gets teased about his age all the time, being a rookie cop. But we do see a lot of those, second career professionals in accounting, and we got to figure out where are they, and how do we find them, and how do we recruit them, and who do we need to have available to interview them, so that it's not just young people. We're not just appealing to young people. We do have to have it be blended. And back to your diversity, that includes the diversity then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I think it's important to say, as you look at your recruiting team, you said not to make sure it's just HR. We would say, also make sure it's not just partners, because sometimes that's intimidating to young people. If I had a rookie that, maybe it's their second career, they would want to talk to a partner. But have young people, that people want people that they can relate to. And so that's something to really look at that is important in your team. So.
And they do want to mix. I do also hear people say, I was really attracted to my firm because there was a partner who came on campus and I got the chance to meet him or her. So, it is like it's blended, Tamara, and we need to have this mix of people so we can do our best to appeal to as many folks as we can.
And I would just want to say two things from a strategy perspective. One is the person that owns the campus recruiting overall in the firm, and depending on the size of your firm, we've talked about dedicated recruiters before. And when we talked about experienced hire recruiting, we said experienced hire recruiting is a different skill set than on-campus recruiting. And if your firm has a combined person, you'll have to look at that, because the coordination is different than a business development or sales job of experienced hire. And so make sure you have the right support staff, dedicated for that, and you're defining the role correctly, because it's not always the same kind of skill set. So that's one thing. The other that you made me think of a few minutes ago is our messaging we want to make sure we're training people that are going out on campus. This is any recruiting, and probably employee retention also, but we want to be consistent in our messaging so that our partners and our staff are saying the same thing. You were talking about benefits, or we were talking about remote, or we were talking about, being back in the office, and, that might not be that person's thing. And so we have to have it be a message that supports our position and our activities, but also that's consistent, so they don't talk to me and get one message and talk to you and get a different message. So that training and that here's where we are in our positioning is important, I think. So
really, really important, and especially around remote and blended work. I think that's one where you could get tripped up, probably in, how do you elevate and develop here, or what are some of the benefits of working for my organization? Like, those are all the different areas we could say, what is our standard positioning? And we will have unique messages inside of that, but there's some of it that's a deal breaker, right? That if you come and work for us, we're going to make sure these things happen. And we want to be sure those are getting communicated. I love that.
And people want your story. I want to know what Renee's story is about working here. I want to know what Tamara's story is about working here. And I want to know, what's available and what can I expect. And that's the positioning that I think needs to be consistent. And then I can share my story inside of that. And we're all motivated by different things. So some of us are motivated by compensation. Some of us are motivated by growth and responsibility. Some of us are motivated by flex, the flexibility. So we have to be able to appeal to that and ask the questions to uncover what that is so we can speak to it. And so I think that's really important.
Well, in technology, Tamara, we added technology to our 9 professional motivators within the last 4 years or so. And some young people, if they find out you're not paperless or you're not using great technology, they're not going to want to come and work for you. And on the flip side, if you are, highlight those things. That we're a small firm, but we are really ahead of the curve in the kind of technology we have available. And maybe the technology we make available to you at home, so you can have that balance of being able to go home, have dinner with your family, and then crank out some more work after dinner if you want to.
Yeah, and reducing the travel, like on the audit side. Our remote technology has created the ability to reduce that travel requirement that used to be a must. I don't think it eliminates it, but I do think it has reduced it. So I was reading an article in the J of A this morning actually about that. And they did a really nice job, talking about, the different ways to, make that available and serve your clients and take advantage of that technology. So you're right. That is a motivator for some people.
Yes.
Well, I think we're at time. Any last minute thoughts you want to share or impart on this topic?
No, the only thing I would leave people with is do step back and think big picture about your campus recruiting. And if you have a team of people that you can sit down and just, do a SWOT exercise or some sort of analytical walking 360 degrees around your campus recruiting to say, what do we want to do differently this year? I would really encourage people to do that.
And if you have questions or you want to, probe on anything we talked about, you can reach out to us at any time. We'd appreciate it. So glad to be here with you this final Monday of July.
Yes, thank you.
Together in August. So we'll see you next week and have a great week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.